Namaskar, Nileshok here, and welcome back to Introduction to Indian Calendar. In this module, we are going to discuss everything lunar, everything related to the moon. In fact, I should say, it's not that we are going to discuss everything about the moon, rather, everything we are going to discuss in this module is related to the moon. Because in reality, there is so much more that we can discuss about the moon. Again, we are going to restrict ourselves to those aspects of the movement of the moon that relate to Tithi, Nakshatra, phases, Paksha, Masa, and a lunar year, which is to say those aspects which are directly connected with the Indian calendar. In the demonstration video, we looked at the position of the Earth at the center and the moon going around it, and also sun going around the Earth. And as a reference frame to track their motions, we were looking at the reference frame of the 27 or 28 nakshatra system. What are nakshatras? They are distant stars. They are called as Yogatara, and they represent one of these 27 portions of these equally divided space of 360 degree of the ecliptic. And remember, ecliptic is the path of the sun around the Earth as seen from the Earth. And this ecliptic remains the frame of reference for everything that we do in astronomy. And naturally, that includes the calendar or Indian calendar. So imagine that what I showed you in the demonstration video is what we are looking at, but only in 2 dimensions. And there is a reason for it. So imagine the Earth is at the center. It is inclined at an angle, and that's all good. This dotted green ellipse, imagine this to be the reference plane of the sun's path, which is the ecliptic. If you recall, the moon, the Earth, and the planets of the solar system are essentially in the plane of the ecliptic, and therefore we can use the same nakshatra reference system to track the movements and motions of not only the sun, not only the moon, but also of all other planets. At the position of nakshatra 27, what I have drawn, that rectangle, think of this as the position of the moon on the Amavasya day, which means, if you recall, on the Amavasya day, the Earth, the moon, and the sun are essentially in one straight line, with moon in the middle of the sun and the Earth. The position of the sun and the moon are essentially together as seen from the Earth. So we begin with the Amavasya day. Okay, the next day, again, it almost looks like Amavasya day, but there might be, actually there will be a very thin crescent that can be observed. And this is the day of Pratipada. The next day will be Dvitiya. Dvi as in two. The next day would be Tritiya, and now you can see that crescent moon there. But keep in mind that even on the day of Pratipada or Dvitiya, there is a crescent moon, although it's not visible in the pictures here. Then next we will have Chaturthi, we will have Panchami, we will have Shashti, Saptami, Ashtami, Navami, Dashmi, Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Trayodashi, Chaturdashi, and the Purnima, or the full moon day. Notice on the full moon day, we will again have the sun, the earth, and the moon in more or less the straight line, except on the full moon day, the position of the earth is in between the sun and the moon, as opposed to the day of Amavasya, when the moon or the position of the moon was between the sun and the earth. Beginning with the day of Pratipada, that is the day after Amavasya, and all the way to the day of full moon, this half, approximately half of the lunar month, will be called a Shukula Paksha. Now we continue for the second half of the lunar month. So again, after the day of full moon, we call it again Pratipada. But this is the Pratipada, or the first day of the second half of the lunar month, or also termed as the Vadya Paksha or Krishna Paksha. Just like the first half, 15 days, fortnight, is called Shukla Paksha, or sometimes Shuddha Paksha. So here at number 16, we have Pratipada again, then Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti, Saptami, Ashtami, Navami, Dashmi, Ekadashi, Dwadashi. We have not reached the Amavasya yet. But I would like to point out that by the time we reach Dwadashi, as far as the background nakshatra, the reference nakshatra 27 is concerned, the moon has completed full cycle with respect to the background nakshatra, in this case, nakshatra number 27. This particular cycle, that is beginning with a specific nakshatra for the moon as seen from the earth, and moon arriving at the exactly same nakshatra, this one is called a sidereal lunar month. Why sidereal? The sidereal refers to the star. So we are starting from a specific reference star, and we are arriving, we meaning the moon, is arriving at that specific reference star again, and that time interval is sidereal lunar month, and that is equal to, on an average, equal to 27 days, 27.3 days. But remember, we have not arrived at the same Tithi, which is the day of Amavasya. So we need to monitor the motion of the moon through few additional days. So 28, 29, and 30. This is when the day of next Amavasya would be reached, which means what? Again, the position of the moon is between the earth and the sun. So notice the position of the sun as seen from the earth has moved from here, number 27, to now number 3, somewhere close to number 3. This time period for the moon to go from one Tithi, in this case Amavasya, to next Amavasya, it takes approximately 30 days, just shy of 30 days. And that is called a synodical lunar month, or a synodic lunar month, and that synodic refers to the conjunction. Now, conjunction of two celestial bodies, but which two celestial bodies? In this case, the conjunction of the moon and the sun. They are together on the day of Amavasya as seen from the earth. So that's why this particular time interval of about 30 days, 29.53 on an average, is called the synodical or synodic lunar month. To recall, the earth is at the center. It is inclined at an angle with respect to the plane of the ecliptic. And what is ecliptic? Ecliptic is the orbit of the sun as seen from the earth, and that is the reference frame for everything that we do in astronomy. Let's begin with the movement of the moon. The sun would also move, but we are going to ignore it other than to identify the days of full moon and the day of Amavasya. So we go one day, the moon has moved from its Amavasya position, that's Pratipada. Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti, Saptami, Ashtami, Navami, Dashmi, Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Trayodashi, Chaturdashi, Purnima, full moon day. And look what happens on the full moon day. The earth is in the middle of the moon and the sun along the same straight line. So next, Pratipada, Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti, Saptami, Ashtami, Navami, Dashmi, Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Trayodashi. Now we have not reached the Amavasya yet, but I want to stop at a Trayodashi for a minute. Remember, we discussed the sidereal lunar month. So we started from the specific point with respect to the nakshatra system, and now the moon has completed one circle and arrived at the same point with respect to the same nakshatra. This one is the sidereal lunar month of about 27 days. But notice, in the meantime, the sun has moved from its original position. So if we want to reach the position of Amavasya again, which gives us what? Which gives us the synodical or synodic lunar month, okay? Again, to bring the sun and the moon in conjunction, that is together as seen from the earth. So we have to go 2 to 3 days further. So 28, 29. So in here, it just visually, it looks like we have completed, but I can go one more. Okay. So around that time, this is the day of Amavasya. What is the nakshatra of the moon and the sun on this day? To find the nakshatra, what we do is imagine you are on the earth, and from there you are going to draw a straight line that goes through the moon and that goes through the sun, and that can be done on the day of Amavasya. And note down the nakshatra, reference nakshatra behind them as seen from the earth. And what is that nakshatra? Again, remember, it won't be exactly a specific nakshatra always. In this case, more or less it is. It is the nakshatra Uttara Bhadrapada. So we are going to always assume an error of plus minus one nakshatra. Okay. So Uttara Bhadrapada is the nakshatra. Now let's begin our journey. Now, when I go to the next day, that is the next Tithi, if I want to know the nakshatra of the moon, what I need to do is draw an imaginary line starting from the earth that goes through the moon and extend that line all the way until we reach the background reference nakshatra frame. And what we will find, for example, here is that the moon is in the nakshatra Revati. What about the sun? Sun has moved, but not much. In fact, it has moved approximately through 1 degree. Okay, and each nakshatra is about what? 13 degrees. You can do that math. 360 degrees of the circle divided by 27. It will give you 13 degrees and some more space measured in arc minutes, for example. So as far as the nakshatra of the sun is concerned, essentially it would be Uttara Bhadrapada. Okay, 1 degree it has changed, and Uttara Bhadrapada nakshatra is 13 degrees wide. But the moon has moved on, and its nakshatra can be Revati. Let's go next. So I will skip a few nakshatras. Okay, so this is Pratipada, Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti, Saptami. Let us say we want to know the nakshatra of the moon on this Saptami day. This is a Shukula Paksha Saptami. What do? We draw an imaginary line from the earth going through the moon, extend it all the way to the background nakshatra space, and note down the nakshatra. In this case, we would say that the nakshatra of the moon, and therefore nakshatra in the Indian calendar, is Ardra. So in Indian calendar, whenever a nakshatra of the day is mentioned, the nakshatra of the day is described, it refers to the nakshatra of the moon. And what is nakshatra of the moon? It is that nakshatra as seen from the earth for the relative position of the moon. How do we find that nakshatra? We draw a imaginary line starting from the earth that goes through the moon and extend it all the way to the background nakshatra reference frame and note down the nakshatra. Let's continue further until the full moon. So this was 7. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. This is the full moon day. Now, what is the nakshatra of the moon on this full moon day? Same process. Draw a imaginary line starting from the earth that goes through the moon, extend it all the way to the background reference frame. And we find here that the nakshatra is Chitra. Aha. This also tells us in the Indian calendar system how to define the name for the lunar month. Whatever is the nakshatra next to the full moon, which means the nakshatra of the full moon is the name of the lunar month for that month. So in this case, it is the lunar month of Chaitra. That's what we are going through. Let's continue. So again, now we are getting into the second half of the lunar month. So we begin with Pratipada, but remember it is the Krishna Paksha or Vadya Paksha of the lunar month. So Pratipada, Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti. If you want to know the nakshatra of the Shashti, this is a Vadya Paksha Shashti or Krishna Paksha Shashti. What do? We draw a line from the earth through the moon, extend it all the way to the background nakshatra system. And you might say the nakshatra of the day is Purvashada. Let's continue until we complete the Sidereal lunar month. That's here. We started from this point. We have completed one circle as far as the moon's motion is concerned. It would have taken about 27 days or so. This is the Sidereal lunar month. And notice the moon is back into the same nakshatra of Uttara Bhadrapada. So from Uttara Bhadrapada back to Uttara Bhadrapada, making that complete circle with respect to the background reference frame of these stars, nakshatra, is that sidereal lunar month. But as far as the synodical or the conjunction lunar month is concerned, the conjunction of the sun and the moon, we have to track additional movement of the moon through additional 2-3 days. And now we have another day of Amavasya. If you want to note down the nakshatras, what you'll find is from Uttara Bhadrapada, the previous Amavasya, we have gone through Revati, we have gone through Ashwini, and possibly halfway between Ashwini and Bharani. This is exactly what happens. In about one synodical lunar month, about 30 days, sun goes through 30 degrees approximately. And remember, one nakshatra is approximately 13 degrees. So 13 times 2 is 26 and 4 more degrees. So the sun has traveled through 30 degrees, which is to say approximately 2.5 nakshatra. That's what we see here. And one lunar month is complete, and more or less one solar month is complete. All right, let's go through another cycle. This time I'm going to run it fast and I'll adjust when the next Amavasya occurs. So 1 Pratipada, Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti, Saptami, Ashtami, Navami, Dashmi, Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Trayodashi, Chaturdashi, Purnima or full moon. Notice what happened. The next full moon, again, Earth, the sun, the moon are in the same straight line. If you want to note down the nakshatra of the moon, we use the same process. Draw imaginary line from the Earth, goes through the moon. We extend it all the way to the background nakshatra system, and we find the nakshatra of the day, which is the nakshatra of the moon, is Vishakha. The previous month, we called it Chaitra because the full moon was near nakshatra Chitra. This month, we will call it Vaishakh because the full moon is near nakshatra Vishakha. And those are the names that most of us are familiar with, right? So we are going to go through this until I get to the next Amavasya. Okay. Notice the sun has moved further through some distance. If we want to know the nakshatra of the sun and the moon on this Amavasya day, again, it is somewhere around Kritika or at Rohini or somewhere between Kritika and Rohini. Okay, let's do one more. So we continue with the next lunar month. We go through the Shukula Paksha or Shuddha Paksha, beginning with Pratipada all the way to the day of the full moon. And when we come to the full moon again, notice the nakshatra of the moon. If we draw this line here again, the nakshatra would appear to be either Jyeshtha or possibly Mula. Now, think of the names of the lunar months you know. You have heard Chaitra, Vaishakh, Jyeshtha, but never a Mula as a lunar month. And so, in this case, our choice is going to be the nakshatra that is already identified with the 12 names of the lunar months, such as Chaitra, Vaishakh, Jyeshtha. Ashad, and so on. So in this case, we will call this full moon, this lunar month, Jeshta. Okay, the month of Jeshta. What would be the next lunar month? We are not going to go through this circle here again, but if we do that, it will fall somewhere here, and we will call that is the month of Ashad. The next month, we will call it month of Shravan. The actual position of the moon, full moon, could be somewhere here. The next month, we will call it Bhadrapad. After Shravan is Bhadrapad. The full moon position would be somewhere here. The next full moon, we would call it Ashwin, and the full moon position could be somewhere here. Next full moon, we will call it, the next lunar month, we will call it Kartik, and the actual position of the full moon would be somewhere here. The next lunar month, we will call it by the name Margashirsha, and the position of the full moon would be somewhere here in the vicinity of Nakshatra Mrugashirsha. The next full moon would be around this Nakshatra Pusha. It may not be exactly at Nakshatra Pusha, remember that. And we will call that lunar month Pausha. The next lunar month, we will call it Magha, because the full moon position would be somewhere in the vicinity of Nakshatra Magha. The next full moon, the next lunar month, we will call it Falgun, because the position of the full moon would be somewhere in the vicinity of Nakshatra Falgunis, 2 Falgunis here. And with that, actually, we would have completed 1 full lunar year, because the next one would be Chaitra again. We focused on the moon, we looked at the Tithi, we looked at the Nakshatra, we looked at the Paksha, Shukula Paksha and Krishna Paksha, or Shuddha Paksha and then Vadya Paksha. We looked at the Sidereal lunar month of about 27 days, starting from a specific reference nakshatra and coming back to that same reference nakshatra. We also looked at the synodical lunar month, which begins with Amavasya and comes back to Amavasya, which is the same phase of the moon. And then finally, we also looked at the lunar year, which is equal to 12 rotations of the moon in the synodical fashion, which is to say, starting with Amavasya, coming back to Amavasya, that's 1 rotation. Doing such 12 rotation added up amounts to the lunar year, and its length is 354 days. How did we get 354 days? For 1 single synodical lunar month, that is to say from Amavasya to Amavasya, it takes about 29.53 days on an average. For simplicity, we took 29.5 days times 12 lunations, 12 rounds of the moon from Amavasya to Amavasya. That adds up to 354 days. Against this, sun takes about 365 days to complete 1 full rotation. And therefore, we said there is a gap of about 10 to 11 days between the length of the lunar year and the length of the solar year. That is all for this module.